May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning. Somehow it just works out that I get the best Gospels. I loved it. Somebody asked me this morning, are we going to hear about sheeps and sheepdogs today? Not today. Got a different story. So let's unpack today's Gospel for a moment. I almost don't care what religious tradition you believe in. If you've ever heard the story of Jesus Christ, most people know the story of the feeding of the 5,000 and walking on water. If you ask an agnostic or an atheist who hasn't really had much study in Christian theology or philosophy or hasn't read the Bible, they probably could tell you when you say, who is Jesus? Jesus is the person that healed the sick. They say he healed the sick. And they say he fed a whole bunch of people with very little and that he could walk on water. So this has two, and really three, of the big things that is sort of the marker for who was Jesus Christ in the world in the day that Jesus walked around. And I'm curious, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I have to ask the question. When you hear today's gospel and you think about the miraculous events that the disciples that were walking with Jesus were able to see, what's your reaction? I'm always very curious about our reaction as Christians in today's world when we hear these miraculous stories of delivery. I don't know about you, but I've not seen anybody recently break up a loaf and actually make it go out to 5,000 people. I haven't actually seen 5,000 people come to hear about Christ either. I'm sure it does happen. There are mega churches out there, but it's not in the world I walk around in. I see 17,000 people at a university that come for a variety of different things, but they don't come for healing, and they don't come for what these people were coming for. So, what do we do with that if we are the disciples of Christ, and we are? Well, we can look to what the disciples of Christ did then and take a hint. They were weary. Jesus looked up. He had gotten into the mountain. He was going to get some private time alone with his faithful followers on the grass. Maybe he would get into some deep teaching because he had heretofore been speaking in parables. And then here comes a crowd of 5,000 people. Here we go again. There's stories in other parts of the gospel where the disciples are like, oh, no, not more. What are you going to do with these people? And so Jesus asked, and one of the disciples on cue says, 6 months' wages aren't going to take care of this. Now, they've been with him. They've watched people be healed. They have been a part of the process, and still, we can't find the way out of this. They were amazed when Jesus delivered once again. Why were the people there in the first place? The people weren't there because they were hungry. They were there and hungry. So the miracle of feeding them was a sidebar. They were there because he had been in the town and he had been healing and he had been casting out demons. And because he had been healing and casting out demons, the sick and the demon-possessed and the people who had great need for whatever it was that he was doing were going to do whatever they needed to do without proper preparation, necessarily, and they were going to follow him. So Jesus had to do something. And I'm always curious about our reaction. Is it skepticism There's some great television shows on the History Channel now that's kind of unpacking the mysteries of the Bible and trying to figure out scientifically, was it possible? I'm not sure that's a good thing, but it's a thing, and people are watching that, and so we're exploring that. But what are we doing with it? What do we do with that information? Do we, wow, how amazing would it have been to be able to walk with Jesus in the flesh, to have been able to see that? Do we question? Are there those among us that question how this is told and what the underlying meaning might have been? I know that there are non-Christians who question. I see them all the time that question the validity of what's being told in the Bible. If the disciples couldn't buy it then, that Jesus had the wherewithal to feed 5,000 people, it's not really a big stretch that 2,000 years later we might have some doubt. Then there's the walking on the water. He didn't show up, boat was leaving, they left him, he'd figure out a way to get there. So they trusted him to be resourceful enough to get wherever he needed to go. But when he was walking on water to come to them, it actually frightened them, because his power and his abilities knew no bounds. Nothing that they believed in their environment could be counted on, because this man could do things with the environment and with everything that they didn't know. So when we factor our reaction in to whatever that happens to be, whether it is not understanding or skepticism or a belief that that was what happened then and then this happens now, it's not really a surprise. It wouldn't be really a surprise. So, but what are we supposed to do as disciples? Are we really supposed to wait on the second coming for miracles to happen again? Or do they already happen? Are they already happening in our lives? Do we talk about them? Do we share them? And if not, why not? I don't know your miracles. I've been here for a year and a half. Granted, year that was COVID. Doesn't count. But I don't know what miracles that you are experiencing in your life. And you know what? You don't know mine. I don't talk about them in open company. Why? Because I'm a mental health professional. And people might think I'm crazy. Well, I'm talking about them today, and it's recorded, and it'll get sent out on Facebook. So if they think I'm crazy, they're going to have to deal with it. But I'm going to share with you some miracles that I know of that are happening in the modern day life today. And maybe you'll share yours. Humans are spiritual beings. One of the crises in our culture is suicide. I am 100% convinced that part of the crisis of mental illness in our society is that people who have the ability to heal and cast out demons, use that term loosely, aren't empowered to do it. And they don't know that they can. I see a population of young adults, everything from adolescence to older adolescents before they get into adulthood. And because the messages of religion, all religion, many religions, the messages of religion have become so fragmented and so judgmental, and so you must fit in this box, or grace and healing are not for you, that we have an entire population of people who are not only skeptical about the miracles, they're also skeptical about anybody that buys into an organized religion. But interestingly enough, of the people that I see for a variety of different things and reasons, not just in my private practice, but just out into the world in the college campuses, there's a common denominator. Atheist, agnostic. But man, Wiccan is so interesting. So interesting. Because it teaches and it preaches and it connects people to the earth and to nature and to animals and to the planets and the solar system and to the natural environment that we live in. Who's that like? Francis. The parallels between what is attractive to our youth of today and to the story and to the framework of Franciscan theology are amazing. But when one tries to make those ties because of where factions of Christianity have gone, it's very difficult to get over that hump, especially if you're only interacting on it with a screen, if you're only interacting on it from what you get from the internet. It takes human being connection, human beings that have connections to the theories and the philosophies and the belief systems of St. Francis, to have relationships so that people can see and hear and connect with our stories and our own miracles that have happened in our own lives. So what are we doing, we corporately, individually, what are we corporately doing to move out of the box and into the world, to break open loaves and fishes and heal and teach and connect? And if we're not doing it, if we don't know what we're doing, if we don't know how to do it, why not? So, the opportunity's there. The gospel's clear, for me anyway. How do we get to where we are? So, I got a caller a long time before I became a deacon. I'm going to tell you that story. And this is going someplace. I lived on a farm in Warm Springs, Georgia, population 408. I had moved there because there was a therapeutic riding program that I became the director of, and I lived my dream of living on a farm with my animals. I had gotten very comfortable living on the farm, and I actually was much more comfortable living on the farm with the animals in the woods than I was with the human world. And I was very active in my Episcopal church. I was on the vestry, and I was a part of the Episcopal Charities Foundation, and you could run down the laundry list of things on my resume. And the truth was, I was involved in the social life of the church, but there wasn't anything feeding me spiritually from the church. And so one year I gave up the church for Lent, and I stayed gone for 4 years. And while I was gone from the church, I never gave up Christianity, and I never gave up my relationship with God, and I never gave up my belief, but I gave up the business and the mechanics because my spirituality had gotten lost in that. And so I studied and learned about a lot of different things, and I explored. Frank Logue, the Bishop of Georgia, says he calls it doing a round on the smorgasbord of spirituality, to test out some things. And I learned an awful lot about different spiritual practices, and ultimately they ultimately made sense to me when I incorporated them all back into Christianity. But I didn't know where to go, and I was really, really struggling, and I was praying, and I had come back to the church, to a different church, but I'd come back to the church, but I was struggling. What do you want me to do? What's next? What's next? What's next? And I got a call one day from a Native American man who had a little shop down in the town of Warm Springs, and he said, I need you to come and see me. And I knew him. I had met him, and he said, I need you to come and see me. I had a dream last night, and I need to share it with you. And I'm like, oh, sure, whatever. So I went down, and he had me come in. He said, I had this dream. The Creator gave me a dream, and you were in it, and I need to tell you this. And he said, hold out your hands. And so he said, hold out your hands with clenched fist. So I held out my hands with clenched fist. Close your eyes. And he kept putting something over my hands, and they kept falling through, and it kept falling through, and it kept falling through. And he said, now, open your hands. I opened my hands, and what he laid in my hands was a bone necklace that is a black and white collar that is worn in Native American ceremony and ritual. And he told me what it was, and he said, the Creator God is trying to give you something, but he can't give it to you because you are approaching the world with closed fist and holding on to everything you have. And you cannot hold on to what you have and receive what's to be given to you. Well, that hit me like lightning, but I had no idea what to do with it. So for the next several years, it's not like I walked out of that and a miraculous transformation happened, except that in my heart, I now had a message. And I spent a long time after that trying to figure out, and my prayer became, let me let go. Let me let go of everything that is standing in the way of my ability to receive whatever it is that you have for me, God. And it was a long journey, and there's a lot of stuff I had to let go, and we'll save that for the book, or maybe the movie. But be that as it may, that was a transformative, miraculous experience. A prophet called by God called me, gave me a message, and it worked my heart for years, and still to this day it works my heart. And it worked my heart on the day that I received the collar as a deacon. And I knew what God was trying to give me. But it took getting a collar from a Native American man to prepare me to be ready to receive the collar of my church. I've had a miracle in the last 36 hours. I have a horse, 13 years. He's been my therapy horse next door. It's why I'm at St. Francis, because I found a barn that was next door to a church. And the Episcopal Church was next door, and that made sense. And that's how God called me here. He made an opening for a barn next door to you. Because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be standing here. Dylan's my last horse, probably, in my life. I've had him for 13 years. He came to me, long story short, his jockey club name is Don't Tell Holly. My husband showed horses with Holly. Holly got him in the divorce. You can put all those pieces back together on your own. Holly's ex-husband purchased Dylan for a lot of money, didn't tell Holly, and had the audacity to name him Don't Tell Holly. That's how I got him in the divorce. However, Dylan came to me as my longtime horse partner was aging, and I didn't want to receive him. Holly tried to give me that horse several times. I don't need another horse. I have one. I don't need another horse. I have one. Finally, there was a 12-year-old kid who needed a good horse to ride. And I said, well, all right, I'll take him for Olivia. I watched my longtime horse friend prepare him to take over when Cisco died. On Thursday, I was teaching a class. I teach animal-assisted therapy. I teach my students how to have insights in their own lives with relationships with animals. On Thursday, I was teaching a class to 15 graduate students who on Friday will graduate and become counselors out in the world. And we were doing an exercise with the Native American medicine wheel, where they were walking the medicine wheel, asking a prayerful question about what is standing in the way of me developing the counselor trait that I've been working on. So compassion, authenticity, assertiveness, whatever their trait happened to be that they needed to bring into the world for their healing to begin, for there to be able to heal others. They'd been working on it with me for the last year. And so this is the culmination, basically, before they go out into the world and graduate. And Dylan's a big part of that. Dylan speaks to humans very clearly. He's very clear about it. And he just had these experiences with these students, and so many beautiful insights had come and all of that. He was hot, put him in a stall, went to take care of them, got rid of them. At noon, I was going to take him out, give him a bath, and so forth and so on. Went to get him out of his stall. He wouldn't move out of the stall. He was standing still. His muscles were all entrenched. Called the vet. Brought him out, called my trainer. He's standing in the stall, and I literally think he's dying. I literally am watching, and at any minute, this horse is going to go down, and I'm not going to be able to get him up. And so we're standing there, and I think my horse is dying. And I have no idea why, because he is literally as healthy as a horse. And I wait on the vet, and vet comes, and that's, okay, the vet comes. We can figure it out now. So whatever it is, we can figure it out. And he stabilizes a little bit, and the vet comes, and we pull in labs, and she's doing all kinds of things, and there's nothing wrong with this horse. His CBC, his labs, everything is perfectly fine, except he looks like he's dying. So we figure out it's heat. We do a couple of things. It's too hot to put him in a trailer and take him to the University of Florida. So he's 1,200 pounds. I am powerless over this. We do everything we can do, agree to watch him overnight. We watch him literally overnight. And in the morning, if he's not better, he's going to the University of Florida. So in the morning, the heat is better, but his back end is off. Vet comes back. By now, it's too hot to put him in the trailer again to take him to the University of Florida. Can't figure out what's wrong with him. She sends it out to 4 other vets. We basically take a guess. It's an abscess in the back hoof created by some other things. So that's my only option. And so we treat it as if it's that, because I don't know what else to do about it. I use Facebook, but I don't use Facebook. I very seldom ask for anything. But I put some pictures of Dylan out on Facebook, and I sent it out in the community. And I said, one of the difficulties about being an equestrian is that you never know when they're going to trot in wrong. And this is what's happened. And whoever you are and whatever mechanisms that you use to communicate with God, please say a prayer for Dylan. And so I prayed, and they prayed, and 100 people responded back. And I was reminded of 2 things. Over 13 years, this horse has touched a lot of people, and all of a sudden I started remembering the stories and the other insights that I'd gotten from him. And there was prayer, and he was covered in prayer, and on the next morning, he was better. And by last night, he was out, and he was able to go out and wander around, and this morning, I just saw him. He's better. He's not well, but he's better. I think he had an abscess in the foot. My critical mind is already running through abscess in the foot, science, treatment, blah, blah, blah. Knowing full well that 100 people were covering this horse and me in prayer in our darkest hours. And he is healed. And I'm going to claim that as a miracle, because it's a miracle in my life, and it's a miracle in the lives that he's touched. So what do we do with this? I've gone way over time. I know. I'll shorten it by the next service. I apologize. But humor me on this. I don't think I'm different from anybody else. I don't know who's called and who's not called. I don't know if everybody's called, but I know if you're sitting here, you're called, because you wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't called. And if you're listening to this sermon online, you wouldn't be listening if you weren't called. So if you are called to be a disciple of Christ, and we're assuming you all are, humor me for a minute. Close your eyes, hold out your hands with closed fist. The Creator God is trying to give you something in your role as disciples of Christ. And imagine that whatever is trying to be given to you is falling through the cracks. It's not coming into your hands. It's falling through. And take a deep breath, trust, open your hands, and hear. The riches of his glory, that he grants you strength in your inner being with power through the Spirit, and that Christ dwell in your heart and grounded in love. I pray that you have the power to comprehend with all the saints, including Francis, what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be fulfilled with the fullness of God. And now to him who, by the power at work within us, is able to accomplish abundantly, far more than all we can ask or imagine. To him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations, forever and ever. Because we can claim that. We can be disciples that are witnesses to God's miracles. Amen.